Hello, everybody. Today I am going to be reviewing the fourth studio album from Icelandic folk band Of Monsters and Men. Their fourth album comes a long 6 years after their last in 2019 with Fever Dream. This is their first album, also not on Republic Records. They are now on their own, more independent Icelandic label. And it's, as I said, been quite a bit of a journey waiting for their return. You know, they haven't put out a lot of records in the last almost 15 years since their first album came out in Iceland in 2011. It came out in the United States and worldwide the following year. If you follow this channel, you know I am a huge fan of them. I've covered all their records on this channel. I did not cover their EP, but that was their most recent, new material release 3 years ago in 2022 called Two, which was 10 in Icelandic and a celebration of 10 years since their debut. And there were some very strong singles on there. And, I will talk about how I feel this album has made a significant departure in sound for the band. And it's one that I'm not 100% on board with, but it's one I'm learning to adapt and grow to love nonetheless. In between their EP in 2022 and this record, the lead vocalist and guitarist of the band, Nana Hilmarsdóttir, released her solo album, How to Start a Garden, in 2023, which I also reviewed on this channel. It'll all be linked below. I thought that the distinction of Nana's sound being a lot more acoustic and a lot mellower with not as much up-tempo, propulsive kind of guitar and trumpet sounds, which is more kind of a staple of the Of Monsters and Men sound, was a great way to sort of differentiate Nana's trajectory as an independent artist. It felt reminiscent of the band's work, but I could also feel her own kind of emotional imprint very strongly in the way it was so subdued in its sound and sleepy in a lot of places, but with a subtle, quiet brilliance that really shone through. However, that is not exactly the sound that I wanted to come back to the full band returning with. When this album started to be teased, we got the first single back in July, Television Love. I was like, yeah, we've definitely brought back more of the band's sound. This definitely feels like an Of Monsters and Men song. But I was also kind of wondering if the bombast and the more piercing vocals and more soaring choruses and melodies and guitar riffs were possibly going to be a thing of the past for them. Then we got Ordinary Creature in August, and I felt like, again, we were inching towards back up from the sleepiness of How to Start a Garden. But we weren't quite fully there. And so now we have the full record, and unfortunately, I will say that it is a record that I am slightly disappointed by, only because I think their first two albums set possibly an impossible bar for me personally to what I want them to achieve. And I suppose it's maybe not fair for me to want them to remake in sound an album they've already done. Beneath the Skin is my favorite record of theirs, and I will never stop gushing about how transcendental that record is for me. It is the perfect bridge between alternative and pop rock, with just this really Icic, Nordic, to-the-bone, direct feeling that is just, it's cathartic. It's a very cathartic record. It's a very ethereal record. It has just all the best. It has that adventurous spirit and that deep, pining melancholy. And of course, their first record was building on that. Their first record had a little bit more of a folkier, campfire vibe. It felt like they were building up. There was a little bit more chimey kind of instrumental, and there's echoes of that throughout all their records. But then in 2019 with Fever Dream, they decided to build a little bit on where they were going, but also add electronic production elements. And I do think that for a lot of songs on that record didn't necessarily pay off for me. I think the strongest songs off of Fever Dream are the songs where they didn't experiment more with that electronic production, adding electronic elements and synths. I think that they sound best when they are a band with just drums, guitar, and, some trumpet. and beautiful piano and vocals. And so they've definitely morphed their sound and evolved throughout their career. And now we arrive at a record that I will say does feel a little bit like a continuation of How to Start a Garden, but with Raggy, the male vocalist's vocals chiming in. There is a little bit more in the, full band sound. Like I said, there's a little bit more up tempo. There's a little bit more of that propulsion that the band usually has in their songs, but it can't escape that mellow sleepiness, that very icy wintriness. And they've always had an icy wintry sound, but it's always been a little more adventurous. This one feels a little tepid, a little timid. I think the analogy and use of mice is an apt analogy and symbol for this record, because while their previous records maybe had a slightly more kind of roaring, like wild, like roaring cat or wolf kind of energy, this album's kind of small and interior and, kind of like what mice, it's kind of like an album for mice in that regard. And I do think that is a very interesting, landscape to paint with the lyrical content, the visuals. The album cover was designed by Jerome Courchaud. There are 14 illustrations in those boxes, but there are only 13 songs on the record. So I'm not 100% sure what to make of that. I remember with Beneath the Skin, there were all these different symbols and all of them correlated to a song on the standard edition. I do see, just looking at it, definitely allusions to some of the lyrics and some of the songs. We've got the towering skyscraper. We've got the TV with the cat face, alluding to television love. And the band has discussed the little vignettes as these little windows into, like a quilt, into family moments, fragments stitched together when you think about life, death, growth, loss, and all of these songs relate to that. And the circle became important as a sign of regeneration. No beginning, no end. The mice constantly marching in a circle, symbolizing to them love and community. The cat to them in the images is more of a symbol of pain, and the mice having to constantly run from the cat. I think that's a brilliant analogy there. And the graphic designer, David Arnor Balderson, did the graphic design for this. And it definitely is a stark, beautiful cover, just a bunch of illustrations that tell parts of the story that they are telling. And the storytelling in a Monsters and Men record is never straightforward. It is always a little quirky, a little bit riddle-like, and the meaning can sometimes feel like there's many layers deep. It's very many layers deep beyond the surface of the lyricism. And that's a very, intriguing aspect to their songwriting. But this atmospheric, very, again, wintry, soft and subtle instrumental work on this record with the melodies, it's something that just takes time for me to warm up to. That's not to say that I don't love when they've done that on previous records. I just always liked a little bit more of that variety and dynamic, the highs and the lows. And this record doesn't feel like it has quite so many highs. I did see someone comment on Reddit that they felt it was a little bit of a downer of a record. And I could definitely back that up in some, more negative ways of looking at this project. It's not going to be my favorite record of theirs, and that's something that, I just have to accept. They may never top Beneath the Skin, but that's okay. They can still have incredible music that grows over time with me, and there are still incredible gems to be found. So let's go through each of these songs. I'm going to try and get into the lyrics as much as I can. Starting with Television Love, we got the lead single and music video in July. One of the more recognizable melodies, I would say, along with the other big single, Ordinary Creature, they had a real way of getting into the brain in a way that a lot of other melodies on this record did not immediately. Dream Team was probably the other one. They scream single. And so it's, important to have that. I'm bleeding love all over the place. A sea of love hide my face. Oh, your call rang out another second now. Drove up to your house and your lights went out. Television love. Oh, your call rang out another second now. Conversation drought. Drove up to your house. Seep inside your couch. Television love. We call to each other to share a very introspective love together, whether it's us sitting in front of the TV and not really doing very much, or us reminiscing, us pining for a love that we feel is a little bit more idealistic than the love that we find ourselves in, which is a little bit more ordinary than perhaps we had been taught in the movies. I definitely interpret the lyrics both ways. Um, in the second verse, standing in the parking lot, meet me in the corner shop. I'm not getting over the pain. Someone give me Novocaine. Leading into the chorus there. In ordinary everyday moments, a glance, an encounter with someone can be the balm that soothes the soul. And a kind of Novocaine for the pain is what I'm interpreting from all of this. In their lyrics, there's always allusions to running to each other's houses. I recognize that in their first album on Lake House. They talk about that in the Little Talks. There's always this allegory of some sort of tree house or safe house. Even in How to Start a Garden, we hear it as the home being this. I mean, I think of in Iceland it being so cold outside all the time in winter. And so there's definitely that Scandinavian term hygge is prevalent when thinking about how in those colder climates, something you know, get under a blanket and experience that warmth and closeness. It's a special kind of warmth and closeness that only those up north countries can truly appreciate when the world is a blizzard outside. It definitely brings that to mind and was probably a huge influence on so much of their songwriting, as for any artist from that region of the world. Track number 2, Dream Team. Worry calls, worry talks. It's a brain thing, the same thing I tried to block. Kicking plants, feeling tall. I'm the face behind the maze, behind the door, but you need me here. Heavy head, don't look down now. It's like you're wondering why you're wondering not to frown. I don't want to cry my eyes out. I was hoping for a minute not to cry. I don't want to see the sun down. I was wondering for a second not to stare, but you need me there. It's got a joyous undercurrent, a buoyant feel. So one of the few songs that escapes that sleepy allegation, which I definitely appreciate. There's this inner monologue. This person is second guessing themselves. It's just, their lyrics are always these brilliant snapshots of kind of inner dialogues that one can have about their insecurities, could be about anything. And in the end, what makes the dream team is someone else to share in that sort of confusion, to say we're here for each other through this. Whatever you're going through, I'm here. Track number 3, The Actor. Really love the acoustic guitar on this one. Very reminiscent to me of some of their earlier records. There's just that whimsical kind of airiness to it. I remember we were waiting like 2 kids in the parking lot. Keep it separated. Is it enough that it's breaking my heart? I forget I'm masquerading. We were laughing, and then I was not. Keep it separated. Is it enough that I'm playing the part? In verse 2, oh my heart, what a horror show. With her crooked nose says, odds are ever in my favor. Could that be my magnum opus? More like bullshit, my grandiose tumor. As a lyric that really stands out, alluding to the role you play in a relationship with someone and reflecting on how well that role was played. Or was there even really any authenticity to that role? Interestingly, Nana said this was originally going to be on her solo record. I have a feeling a bunch of these songs had that beginning, and she felt, no, this is more band fit. Tuna in a Can might be, on first listen, one of my favorite songs on the record, because the melody is probably the most boisterous and memorable out of at least the non-singles that we got off the record on release day. Tuna in a can, sticky from the brine. I thought I'd gone bad. You thought I was fine. And he came down the stairs. Remember what he said. Heavy is the head. Doesn't say this, but that wears the crown, I'm assuming. Happy is the fool. You're insecure. Lost in your mother's. Lost in your daddy's shoes. This dim lit living room feels like a pocket of your brother's suit. And it all comes back around. I know that I've not really tried. I don't get a ton from the lyrics to grasp story-wise that makes any sense to me, but I don't really mind. Sometimes the lyrics, there'll be this like very specific, reference to something ordinary, usually food related. It reminds me of Sugar in a Bowl, which was a song off of their My Head is an Animal 10-year re-release. From 2021. Forgot to mention that. They did also do a re-release with 2 bonus songs that were originally from that era that they never released properly, right before that 10-year EP, which just allow for some really kind of, unique lyricism that is domestic but broad at the same time, and they know how to do that very well. Barefoot in Snow is one of those songs that I'm going to need a little bit more time with. It definitely melodically, and of course not just because of the snow reference in the lyric, reminds me of Waiting for the Snow off of their 3rd record. You tell me a secret, I'm telling no soul. All this pain in your pocket is heavy to hold. I wish you were patient enough with yourself, but it's dark in the hole. You're barefoot in snow. In the very, very vulnerable sounding, almost not even singing vocal of Nana's in the chorus, I wish I was happy. I wish I was dripping with joy. And then the reflection, it's so hard to be happy. It's so hard to be dripping with joy. It has, again, there's a piano chord that is lifting this song into positive territory in terms of its buoyancy, but there's such heaviness imbued in the lyrical content. We worship the devil, we worship the gods, so it perfectly evens out to nothing at all. I spoke with you Wednesday, we spoke before noon, about how this old planet wasn't made for us two. Your arms are a blizzard, I step in the snow, still feels like I'm dying, but just not so slow. Feels like I'm in some kind of control, and I can count to 1, 2, 3. I wish I was happy, but I forgot my words. I don't speak much lately. And I forgot to tell you maybe, a wish for sun is wishful thinking. Someone said a lot of nothing. I lost my key inside your party, so you could call me back. Love that analogy of, I left something purposefully in, your place, so that you had a reason to reach back out to me. And a wish for sun is wishful thinking. I mean, again, seasonal affective disorder. When you're in a cold and dreary place, you can't expect a lot of sun in those long winter nights. There's this kind of ambivalence presented, this sort of numbness in the lyrical content that is sort of, I think, what juxtaposes the heaviness of the lyrics and the lightness of the instrumental. These two things kind of make someone very numb and depressed in a very kind of apathetic way. And that's what I'm getting from some of the, lyrical content here. Fruit Bat is the longest song on this record, and I do think the most emotional. There's not a ton of lyric, but when it ascends into this motif that crescendos, they do this so well on all of their records. Yellow Light was the first and most glorious rendition of that kind of example of this, but also Thousand Eyes, which had no vocals, or one repeated line, very few vocals. This is another, notch on their belt in this type of storytelling. I know something you don't know. Something somehow in the dead of night, we're like Bunny and the reptile. I need something you don't seem to need. A sweeter goodbye. I'm like a fruit bat hanging tight. For the bunny and the reptile analogy, I see them as contrasting, warm-blooded, soft, cute, and fuzzy, and then the reptile, cold-blooded, scaly. Those two things don't go together on paper. And then the fruit bat is something that I think in a, immediate reaction is something to someone that's very scary and lives in a very dark and gloomy place. But if you look closely and you get over that initial reaction, they're actually the cutest little creatures. And they're very, at least to humans, harmless. And alluding to yourself as this creepy, at first glance, creature that's hanging in the night, waiting, that just wishes for someone to see you a little more clearly to get past that initial reaction, is something that I think is explored here lyrically in just such a melancholic fashion that becomes its own transcendent instrumental piece as the song progresses. This is definitely one of my favorite songs on the record. The lyrics and the melody are just so gutting and simple, and memorable in the way they need to be, in this mournful, lamentative kind of state that I think is the better version of what this kind of mellowed out kind of music, sort of like Disaster Master on Nana's record, is in a similar vein there. Picking things back up, we have Kamikaze, obviously a reference to the fighter planes in World War II in Japan, suicide, missions, dropping stuff. It's happening again, my blurry-eyed friend. I'm like a bug, I'm like a slug. Something in the way, it's bigger by the day. Is it showing now? It's how I move, it's how I am. My kamikaze, why do words not always come so easily? When you think you know just what? Kamikaze, while the conversations grow, your grinding teeth, and you never know just what to say. I need a minute to process my feelings. You're coming in hot. I need to, this is the one person expressing to the other their inner machinations, about potentially, in my mind, why it might be so hard for them to profess their love to someone. That's what I'm interpreting when they talk about words not coming so easily, conversations causing you to grind your teeth, not knowing what to say. It could be a good thing, or it could be, this other turmoil that's causing you to have doubts about a relationship. Definitely a more memorable melody, and as I said, probably the second most up-tempo song alongside Dream Team. The Towering Skyscraper at the End of the Road, what a title. Wait, give me something to say. Write it down on a paper, fold it up in a plane, and I know this was never my home. The towering skyscraper at the end of the road. I see this as an allusion to capitalism, because the towering skyscraper at the end of the road, to me, symbolizes money and fame. We all, particularly those in the music industry, are probably taught to want to strive towards. But she's saying that was never my home. It was never where I felt like my path or purpose was leading. I'd rather go to a cabin in Iceland with my friends and my bandmates. Thank you very much. We're going to go off of our major label. Like this is very much. So I carry on, pick another song. The road is paved with good intention, talking heads on my bed. I'm hoping that's how you remember me. To me, this is Nana and Ragnar reflecting on their journey as musicians in the industry. That's how I'm interpreting it. Ordinary Creature has this levity to it, this hopefulness to it. I love the guitar, the drums, the march-like quality of it. It was a great choice as a single. I was on a train heading through the veins of your heart. You were looking in, but the passenger window was dark. Slow swim in slow gin. I learned what slow gin is, actually. My cousins in the UK were making it. It takes this sloe, which is this plant, these berries, and you put it in, ferment it in alcohol, and you create slow gin. Anyway, I wouldn't know that if I didn't have British relatives. Slow swim in slow gin, getting lost in the labyrinth. I've been grinning through Easter like an ordinary creature. Farewell, my dreaded fear. Thank you, but I'm out of here now. I wish I could run to your house when it gets dark out, is repeated for the chorus. Once again, we are talking about going to someone's house, and we know it's deeper than literally going to someone's house. The illusion of being on a train, going to someone's heart. These are common illustrations that they use to talk about the journey one goes on in, feeling the feelings of growing love. And these are ordinary things. This is part of being a regular human being, or a mammal, like a mouse, if we share that in common. And we all are looking for somewhere to feel safe, particularly when the lights go out. And that person is that place you would ultimately like to find comfort in. Apparently, they talked about it being about starting to come back to yourself after remembering, after you've been not feeling so well, and feeling this sort of, this is what it's supposed to feeling. This is how ordinary life and feeling as a creature on this earth is supposed to be. Styrofoam Cathedral. This is one of the two songs on the record that I'm going to be honest, I had the most difficulty getting into. Now, this is probably the third most up-tempo song on the record, with some very, pronounced belting vocals that we don't have on so many other songs. The verses are promising melodically, but in the chorus, something falls flat. It doesn't rise to the occasion, like in the note structure, the way I'd want it to. And it just makes me think of songs like Slow Life, where that's done much more, Wolves Without Teeth. It just makes me think of songs where that was more successfully implemented sonically for me. There I go into my styrofoam cathedral, away from the sirens and the grocery stores, busy parking lots, and teeming floors. Hoping you'll understand, I am honestly flawed. Styrofoam is a cheap, man-made material. Maybe there is a reference to drinking in, the styrofoam cup, the solo cup kind of thing. But I think that, it is also a literal reference to going to the same stores, the same places, buying the same things, the same drinks. I'll see you at the night shift. Being in your head, cerebellum, you're teasing me, you're holding me back, you're freezing me. I need to find a way to escape. In my mind, it would be almost escaping what I would consider the styrofoam cathedral, which I would consider to be the supermarket. But you could look at the styrofoam cathedrals being like more of like a domestic version of that, away from the more public version of that. I don't know if that makes any sense. Sometimes with these lyrics, if they don't provide a lot of insight, you're on your own. You're on your own, kid. The Block. This icy, plodding keyboard melody is very intriguing. It's the backbone of the song. I guess I like the pain more than I like my health. I guess I sometimes sing to try and help myself. I'm trying hard to smile. I'm trying hard to laugh. I tell myself this, I tell myself that. Love isn't the calm, no, love isn't the still. Walking with the wind to try and catch a thrill. I can see the steeple brush against the sky. I see the place where we said our goodbyes. Yeah, it's a slow, slow break, a hard, hard shake, repeated in the chorus. And then in verse 2, we reference the block by saying, I'd never go out, I'd stay at the block. I wonder if, that's more what the lyric is referring to, or if it's more referring to something literally being blocked. So interestingly, they believe that The Block and Mouse Parade, the preceding song, are part of one story. They talk about the block as sort of being this concrete structure in the city where you're in amongst all these people and all these emotions, dealing with all the complex emotions of socialization. And then you find a way to escape through the floorboards as the mice. And interestingly, they wrote the lyrics of The Block to be sort of what the perspective listening to the people would sound like to the mice, if that makes any sense. The mice's perspective of what's going on up above. Mouse Parade, it's not admitted, it's the one song that doesn't quite fit. And if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I really do think this song would have benefited from being slightly shorter. As more of like an interlude, a 2 minutes, something like that, I think it would have been the perfect sort of part of the, tapestry of the work. But stretching it out to 4 minutes, I'm not sure there's enough there. Although don't get me wrong, I appreciate a meditative, ambient moment. However, it's not something I'm going to be replaying on my playlist very often, listening to in the car. It's something that is just for a very, very specific, moment, introspective moment that you would be listening. Our home, warm table set, all is love, shame, mouse parade. One day winter came, they go away, make mouse parade. Some lost, we stay, we wait, all is love and pain, mouse parade. Some gained, we came, we made, tower to the sun, mouse parade. Our home, nest, sleep, dog, bad, all is love and pain, mouse parade. That's obviously a lyric that is an allusion to the album title, which I do think is a apt title for this record. You almost don't recognize Nana's vocals. There's such a pitch to it that is unfamiliar. And the slow, deliberate, methodical nature of it, it almost feels like they're coming in from the cold and they don't have a lot of energy. And they're just barely getting out these words. And they're kind of fragmented. They're, not strung together in ornate sentence structure, but they're just getting the point across. And you're just meditating on these words. Love, pain, shame. It is this meditative, contemplative, ruminative moment. And it very much is symbolized, emblematic of, I think, the imagery that they're going for of mice under the floorboards. I think of a Wes Anderson movie and I see these songs being the perfect soundtrack to like these animated little stop motion mice having their, little cries and moments of reflection and pondering of the humans above them going, what the heck is going on? But also it's about shrinking yourself down in that perspective of, we are all these vulnerable, fragile little creatures sometimes under the floorboards of life, coming in from the cold and, just trying to get through the next day, keep on marching. There's, that march-like quality is something I think is emblematic of the rhythms of a lot of their songs. And that's something that is prevalent, particularly on this record, this slow, steady rhythm. And that's why, like the block, for example, there's that repeated motif in the piano that forms a march. You notice it on Barefoot in Snow. There's that sort of grounding, sort of wintry sound that I think symbolizes just this sort of resolute acceptance of life is pain, but also life is gorgeous, and we have to keep living despite the pain. And so then, hence the title. And then we end with this really close, fire-lit acoustic moment where the most emotion, I think, comes through to me, at least in the sonic and melodic construction. Waking up just before the morning news, someone said the world is ending. Something's kind of falling from the sky, but that's all right with me, such is gravity. Everything around here must come down eventually. Come on, darling, come on back to me somehow. What a beautiful, heart-wrenching sentiment. Picture the end of the world and what your true emotions would be if you happen to be in love with someone and with them in that moment. I think you might take solace in that, at least. So heavy to contemplate. The song ends with this outro that doesn't even really fully finish. Sorry eyes, don't be sad. Turn around, don't look down. Sorry eyes, sing it back. Where's your head? You better turn around. Sorry eyes, don't be sad. It's all right in the end. Sorry eye. And then the asteroid hit. And that was the end. What a beautiful way to emotionally tie the end of this record up. And it's a shorter track. This one could have been longer, and Mouse Parade could have been shorter. That would be a big critique of mine. But, I also think the slightness of it is important, especially since it maybe does feel a little bit like a half-finished song because the world was ending, and that was all they had time to put to tape. But the emotionality, I mean, again, no one does it like Monsters and Men. They don't need to always make the lyrics, everything jump out at you at once for you to understand the raw emotion that's being displayed. I mean, Nana's vocals alone, I always feel that. Ragnar's as well. I mean, they're both just so, they always sound so melancholic and wistful, just naturally in how they sing. And it's just something I'm always going to be drawn to their music for. But overall, I do think that it's got a lot of moments, and it's better with close headphones. I definitely think like listening to this record in the car, especially if it's not winter. It's not quite winter here yet. We still got some green. I don't know if it's quite hitting like it will in those icy white nights, and in headphones in particular. This is a little bit of a micro record rather than a macro record. But like I said, it's a little sleepier. It's a little less boisterous than I would perhaps like. It's a little bit less transcendent sonically as I would like. It just doesn't take me to places in the same way. It feels a little bit more timid, than wanting to just be boundless and exploratory and revelatory and cathartic and kind of all those things that I feel like some of their earlier records had more of. And I do wonder, and even their EP recently had some of that. I do wonder if that's just a thing of the past for them, or again, each record will continue to evolve in sound and be something slightly different. They've come a long way since Little Talks, and you still hear that through line. They still use all those animal metaphors, the home and house metaphors, and they still have this like Nordic, Icelandic feel, but and that folky alt pop sound, alt rock sound. But there's always going to be like different levels of how much it's turned up, and sometimes I feel like on this record maybe perhaps could have used a little bit more turning up of that dial. But the monotone has its place. It's got that depressive energy, and I'll be honest, that's definitely fitting for how days of late have been for me on many a day. So I will definitely be vibing for it for that reason on those heavier moments. But like I said, there's hope in it as well. There's always this hope in the lyrics and in the melody that comes through. I'm going to link a ranking. I'm going to start doing that for these album reviews. A ranking as of right now of all my songs from favorite to least favorite. Let me know in the comments what your favorites are. Were you satisfied with this record? Were you perhaps like me a little disappointed that it didn't have quite the melodic standout? It didn't have quite the impact that perhaps earlier record might have had for you sonically. It's just you can't expect an artist to just rehash the same sound over and over again. So I can't critique them for that entirely. But yeah, let me know the thoughts in the comments. I hope you all enjoyed this review. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all in my next one. I hope you all have a wonderful, blessed day. Peace, love, and light. Bye.